we're just about to overtake the US as the country that has the most ultra-processed food in the world.
Award-winning epidemiologist.
Best-selling author and medical professor.
Ranked in the top 100 most cited scientists in the world.
Tim Spector.
What are the consequences of not looking after our gut?
Well, we're seeing it now, this epidemic of food allergies.
We're talking gut health,
We're in a fiber crisis.
food fraud,
You've got to realise that it's all one big con.
and how to optimize our health the right way in what and how we eat. You are about to question your whole relationship with food. Hi, I'm Abby Clancy and welcome to Exhibit A. Renowned for his groundbreaking research and pioneering approach to nutrition, my guest today has completely reshaped the conversation around what health and wellness truly means. Welcome, Tim Spector. Of course, I know who you are, but for those who possibly don't know who you are, who is Tim Spector?
A doctor who I used to be a rheumatologist. I'm a professor of genetic epidemiology at King's College in London. I'm a co-founder of the nutrition and science company Zoe, and I also write books and do media stuff. And I've just written a cookbook.
A top 10 book.
A top 10.
Congrats on that. Have you always been super healthy?
No, I was lucky that physically, I wasn't particularly overweight. I liked sport at school. And so I always thought I was fairly healthy, but I was lazy. So that balanced it out a bit. Mm-hmm. And around in my 30s, I started discovering that I really wasn't that healthy. I got back pain and things. And so only when problems happened did I do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing stretching and things like that when I was in my 30s. That helped my back pain. But I still was lazy and my diet was pretty poor.
And when you say poor, what do you mean?
Well, it was an average medical student's doctor's diet. It was what we thought was healthy.
Yeah.
So it wasn't massively high in calories. It was generally low fat. But it was high in starchy things and lots of rice and lots of pasta. I used to have things like orange juice regularly and croissants and muesli for breakfast. And, I'd favor these low-fat products, which at the time we were told were super healthy for us. When I look back at it now, I say that was a really bad diet. And I didn't really think about it until I got sick when I was in my mid-50s. But before that, it's like most people, if they're not going to the doctor, they don't have any particular problems, you think, okay, well, I'm not that bad. And really no one, certainly as a doctor, no one really thought that diet was that important. It's much more important, we thought, just to exercise a few times a week.
Yeah.
And as long as you're eating a reasonable diet, a bit of fruit and veg, the rest didn't really matter. So there was no reason for me to suspect that I was doing anything wrong because I was eating the same as my peers. And you thought, oh, well,
The whole world of health and nutrition and wellness is a complete minefield. And there's so many conflicting theories of what we should and shouldn't be doing. Where do we start?
Either doing like I did my own research.
Yeah.
So in about 2012, I said, right, I'm really going to start from scratch here. What's nutrition telling us? What are the websites telling us? What's the NHS website saying? And because I have a scientific background, my job was epidemiology, which is really studying the cause of diseases. I was ideally placed to do that. And I could sort of tease them apart, go down to the trials and actually work it out. The general public can't do that. So they have to work out someone they trust. Yeah.
But can we trust the
companies they trust? But, and unfortunately, governments recently have let us down.
Yeah.
And that the information that we're given by these governments is A, out of date, and B, basically forced on them by the food industry.
Yeah.
So normally I would say, yes, trust, the NHS website, trust the government, trust the food guidelines. They're correct. They're no longer up to date or correct in this country because the food companies are essentially bribing them. So that makes it difficult. Then you have what does someone do? They will go to the internet, and you get distracted by some nutrition guru who hasn't got any credentials necessarily, other than that like all of us, we like food, and they think this is a good, and they sell supplements and they tell you this is great, and clearly you shouldn't trust people who only directly sell you a supplement because they're so conflicted. They couldn't see the truth even if it was right in front of them. So it makes it difficult for people. But I think my key takeaway is that you shouldn't believe anything that is so simple. If someone's offer you a quick fix, whether it's to lose weight in 6 weeks, stop all your illnesses, you could instantly get rid of all your allergies, depression, anxiety, cancer, and it's so simple, all you have to do is X.
Yeah.
Then don't believe them. Because the science of nutrition is really complicated, food is complicated, and it takes time to learn it and understand it. So what I now say to people is take the time to actually learn about nutrition. Take the time to realize that it's not about calories. It's not about how much fat is in your diet.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the quality of food and the hundreds of chemicals that are in food that have a huge impact on your body, and work out someone that you trust that has the background in science to sort this out. They're not just in it to sell you something. And realize that whatever you do, it's a long-term journey.
Yeah.
It's not a few weeks.
It's a lifestyle, isn't it? It's a lifestyle change.
Exactly. It's changing your view about food long-term, which means you can't be drastic and draconian, and that going on a 6-week keto diet is not sustainable long-term for anybody, or 99% of us. And therefore you shouldn't even think about really starting it. If you can't envisage you doing this long-term, don't even think about it. So it's changing that mindset from the sort of diet world where we were told there's a quick fix, this is magic drink, magic potion, set of this, do this for 6 weeks, pay your money, and you're sorted. Hang on a minute, what happens, 6 months later? Well, in all the cases, we now know that you rebound and you're worse off than when you were started, and you're poorer.
Your specialist subject is microbiome. What is our microbiome for people who may not know?
So microbiome is the word we use for the community of little microbes that live in our gut. And when we talk about our gut, it's not about our stomach.
Yeah.
It's about the lower part of the intestine, the colon. Yeah. And you get hundreds of trillions of these guys living there. People have heard of bacteria. There's also fungi in there. There are viruses in there. There's some parasites in there. That means if you've got it, you're less likely to have internal body fat and cholesterol problems.
Wow.
So you've got all these microorganisms in there. It's like a little jungle. They're all working together. And there are as many bugs in there as there are cells in our body. So really we are half microbe, half human.
Wow.
And the way to think of them is little mini pharmacies. They are producing chemicals. And this helps you understand why they're important, because the more you have of them, the more different ones, the more different chemicals you can produce. And your body, these generally useful chemicals that are signaling to your immune system, signaling to your nerve system, signaling to your brain about how to really calm everything down, get a really good balance in life. And so you can deal with the stresses of infections and anxiety and depression. They produce chemicals that actually go directly to the brain. So have you heard of one called serotonin?
Yes.
because that's the basis of the drug Prozac, acts on serotonin. Microbes produce that. And there's another one called GABA, which is the same chemical that's affected by Valium. So
I don't think I've got either of those two. Because I'm always stressed.
Well, we've all got a little bit of them, but it's just giving you an idea of what we're discovering about the gut microbes. They produce this stuff, and importantly, they produce really important chemicals to steer our immune health.
Yeah.
So that it's not overreacting and causing food allergies. It's not overreacting and causing autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and celiac disease. And it's not, and it's working efficiently to prevent cancers, because the immune system is always fighting cancers and fighting aging. So has huge effects beyond just the metabolism and gut health.
Yeah.
So it really controls everything. So we all need to learn, how to look after our gut microbiome in the same way we want to look after our liver or we want to look after our brain.
Yeah. And how do we improve our gut health?
There are fairly simple rules. The first one is to reduce ultra-processed foods.
Okay. And by ultra-processed foods, what do you mean by that?
Fake food.
Okay.
Food that's made in factories.
Yeah.
That contains additives to give it more taste, flavor, make it stick together with emulsifiers or artificial sweeteners, preservatives, chemicals that our body isn't used to. And because they're fake foods, they generally don't have the normal structure of the plant. They don't have the fiber, don't have the general nutrients. And unfortunately, that's now 60% of our diet in the UK.
Yeah.
In deprived areas, 90%, and in children, it's even higher. So we know that these are really bad for our gut microbes, and so we need to reduce that down, not to zero, because that's really tough, but at least to the levels of, say, Italy and Spain, where it's only about 10%, in Portugal. 6 times less, that's what we need to move at. We're just about to overtake the US as the country that has the most ultra-processed food in the world.
Oh my God. I can't believe that. It's like these foods are marketed as foods to feed your family.
Yes, they are. And they're marketed often as healthy. So if you go to the supermarket, you'll see little healthy stickers saying, with added vitamins.
Yeah.
We don't need those vitamins, so that's useless. We've got added protein. We don't need fake protein. We've got plenty of protein. So they're giving these messages, and they might say low fat or low calorie. Well, that's because they've got other chemicals instead that cause problems. And we know that a really important thing for people to know is that there's been a study recently where they gave 30 people stuck in hospital for 2 weeks, either identical meals that were made from scratch and virtually the same meal made from ultra-processed foods. And the group eating the ultra-processed foods overate by 25%.
Yeah.
So they ate a quarter more than the other group, although, the composition was the same. So if you eat those foods, it'll make you hungrier quicker as well as messing up your gut health. So that's why one of the big reasons we've got such an obesity crisis as well is people think they're eating healthy foods because it's got vitamins and it's low fat. Actually, they're going back and eating even more of it.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the number one thing, is to reduce that. Then you've got eating more plants, diversity.
Yeah.
So with Zoe, we've got a new sort of slogan saying, try and eat your 30 plants a week.
See, I grew up on 5 a day. What's the difference?
Well, the 5 a day, was probably an orange juice. It was some potatoes, some peas, an apple, and a tangerine or something, and you have that, or a banana, and you have that throughout the week, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're saying is that's not enough to really help your gut microbiome.
It's the variety you need.
The variety, and some of those forms of those, like you see in supermarkets, say part of your 5 a day, but they're ultra processed. So they're using that to fool you. Whereas the idea of getting more variety into your diet means that you're going to get more different microbes. And we know that gut health is not just about, looking after the ones that are there. It's trying to encourage a greater range of different microbes. And you do that with different foods because they're very specific. Microbes are very fussy. You think your children are fussy, but these microbes are really fussy.
Okay.
There's one microbe that only drinks coffee.
Really?
And it's just waiting around for if you're a tea drinker, it's really bored, right? It's got nothing to do. Give it coffee and it'll increase 5 times the amount. And we've all got this microbe, and that's all it does. So it gives you an example that if you think about that, and so say you want to have some rare spice or something, or some pomegranates or things that you don't normally eat, baobab, that will encourage other microbes to grow, and you'll get a greater diversity, which means you'll be having more pharmacies producing more healthy chemicals for your body. So that's why this diversity idea, this 30 plants a week, I think is taking off.
Yeah.
Because it also means you don't then worry about counting fiber, about counting what you're eating. You know that you're going to get this diversity, this richness of foods.
Yeah.
Regardless, you're not having to log everything all day. It's just, okay, let's just go for this. And when in doubt, add some extra nuts and seeds because they count. You add some herbs, some spices, a spice mix added to things. Curry powder is a mix of herbs, actually really good. So a spoon of that in things just to liven it up.
And that's tasty as well.
The more diversity, the tastier it is.
Yeah.
Difference in, you're exciting yourself. You're not stuck in that food rut that so many people are, and I was.
Yeah.
You used to put the same things into your supermarket trolley just because there was too much choice. So you say, I'll just go to the family favourites.
Yeah, I do that every week on my online shop. Your favourites, all straight in the basket.
So, but if in your food shop next time and we're trying to work towards this, that there be a thing saying, have I got my 30 plants a week in?
Yeah.
And it's actually much easier than you think. And I start in the morning with my breakfast, and we'll be adding a sprinkle of nuts and seeds, which has about 10 different plants in it, right? So these all count.
So just going back to the 30 plants a week, organic versus non-organic, does that really matter? And can we trust, you go into a supermarket, you're buying all this lovely fruits and veg. Can we trust them that they're good, putting goodness into our body and it's not artificially grown, pesticides?
If you go to a greengrocer's or on a supermarket, you can be pretty sure that if you can see that the fruit and veg, and it's not in huge amounts of packaging and things, it's going to be good for you.
Okay.
And that's a general rule because, you can see it hasn't been ultra processed because you can actually see the plant
and it's
there in front of you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be disguised in a way that it means it's been completely transformed in a factory. So that's the first thing. So all fruit and veg is going to be good for you. Okay. Now, there are some caveats because in this country, like many others, we spray these crops with pesticides, and some foods have much more pesticides than others. So if you're eating a lot of strawberries, for example, or a lot of oats, then they have the highest levels of pesticides spraying in order to dry them out.
Okay.
And if you can afford it, it is better to go organic because you will then get 4 times less levels of these chemicals in your blood. Now, at the moment, the science isn't completely clear about how bad these pesticides are. There's some suggestion they can cause some rare cancers in people if you ingest a lot of them. They might be more dangerous for pregnant women and young children. But we do know that organic food is more expensive than non-organic food. So organic food is pesticide-free generally. So it has trace elements of these things in it. So people ask me, well, if I can't get organic food, should I not eat it? And the answer is no. You're much better off eating normal pesticide-sprayed vegetables and fruit than not eating it at all. Just give it a wash.
Yeah.
Some of them are fine because you peel them. So obviously eating an orange or something like that, you're not going to get any real pesticide under that thick skin.
Yeah.
Like avocado is similar. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. But if you've got the money and you want to promote more and more organic farmers, then I do urge people to spend their money that way and get a product that you know is going to be healthier, and it's more care has been taken in cultivating it.
So if we are on a budget, are there any certain foods we should prioritize to go organic for?
Yes, I think if you like eating a lot of strawberries, then they have such high levels on it that it might be worth getting organic strawberries, and berries as well. So you can often get frozen berries that last all year, and you put them in the freezer. That's what I do. Yeah. So if you can get ones that are organic, it won't cost you very much more.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, a lot of people like oats for breakfast and give that to their kids. I would really urge that people focused on that, because they have the highest levels recorded if they're not organic. God. So they're the main culprits. If you want to focus, so you can't afford to do organic for everything, they're the ones I would go for. Okay,
let's talk about eating the rainbow. I grew up on the 5 a day, but in your book you talk about eating the rainbow. Can you just explain that a bit more?
Well, eating rainbow has been around for a while, actually. It's not a term I invented, but no one knew why you should eat the rainbow. It just seemed like a good thing to do, and I think it was to get more plants into your diet.
Okay.
But we now know that the colors themselves are a sign that there are certain chemicals in those plants that are really healthy for us.
Yeah.
So we want to move away from beige, basically.
Yeah.
So the brighter the color.
Favourite.
Children's favourite
option all the time. She drives me mad.
It's the safe bet. So bright colors, so bright reds, purples, really dark colors, really bright greens. These signify that there are chemicals in those that are healthy for us. Okay. These are chemicals in the plant that protect them against infection and wind and sun, called polyphenols. Mm-hmm. And so we're eating these sort of defense chemicals when we eat these types of food. The other thing that tells us a food is good for us and has these polyphenols is if it's slightly bitter. Okay. So you bite into a walnut or something, you got that slight what we call astringency in the tongue. It's a bit like some red wine does the same, dark chocolate, the coffee, olive oil. These all contain high levels of these things. So that's that's an indicator these are healthy foods. And we now know they're healthy because of these chemicals, which don't go directly into our blood, but our microbes use them. So they're like rocket fuel for our gut microbes. So really important to get regular doses of these in. And of course, again, it adds to this variety. It's just another way of also getting more different things onto your plate.
What are the consequences of not looking after our gut? Not feeding our gut, all these?
Well, we're seeing it now, this epidemic of food allergies. Yeah. To some extent, obesity, putting on weight because it's difficult to control your appetite signals. We're seeing irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, at levels we never saw when I started medicine. Wow. It was really a rare disease then, and now it's about a third of women are reporting IBS-type symptoms, which are bloating and constipation. And
why is that for just women, do you think?
Well, it's men as well, but it's higher in women. It's higher in women. We don't know. We don't know why that is. Could be anatomical. Yeah. But there are many conditions that vary between men and women. Different immune systems is possibly the cause. They used to call it completely psychological. Yeah. And just oh, well, that's just hysterical women, but we now know that's not true. And because of the connection between the gut microbes, which we know are disordered in this, there have been lots of studies, we know that's likely to affect the immune system. So it's probably causing a low-grade irritation of the immune system.
Yeah.
Because most of the immune cells in the body are actually in the gut.
Okay.
Most people don't realize that. They think they're in the neck or somewhere else, but they're actually in the gut, picking up signals all the time. So, what you're putting into your gut is really crucial. And your immune system, if it thinks things aren't right, it goes into like defense mode and said, okay, well, let's just put out a bit of low-level chemicals to sort of kill things off. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what's happening in IBS. It's like a state of anxiety in the gut. And then we used to think it all came from the brain to the gut, but we think probably now it comes from the gut to the brain.
Yeah. I think that makes more sense, actually.
So increasingly, there's a whole new science about even depression could be, caused because of your gut, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because of this inflammation, this sort of brewing immune system that's just then sends signals to the brain, and the brain thinks, oh, I'm under attack. I need to just shut down a bit and be wary of what's going in my guts and act differently. So, but a bad gut, not only causing bloating, constipation, diarrhea, can lead to reflux symptoms. So we know this because we've done very big studies of over 100,000 people that when we improve their gut health, a lot of these symptoms disappear.
Yeah.
In ways we hadn't thought. The other thing we learned through people doing Zoe in our trials, this is the program where we're sort of shifting the diet towards a gut-friendly, less sugar spike, fat spike way. One of the first things we see is an improvement in mood and energy.
Yeah.
So, which we weren't expecting at all. But people just said, suddenly I've got double the amount of energy. My mood suddenly lifted within a few days. And this all suggests to me that, we're reducing this inflammation in the body that is causing, not major symptoms, not making you go to hospital or anything, but it's just
a sluggish.
Yeah, that brain fog, that feel like I just, at the end of the day, feel very tired. People don't realize the association between the brain and our diet.
How big a role does genetics play with this? Or can we completely, are you saying if we change our diet, we're not going to get diabetes, we're not going to get bowel cancer and all these terrible illnesses?
Well, I studied genetics for 25 years. And I ran this twin study, the world famous twin study. So I was a big genetics fan. But I've learned that even identical twins have very different gut microbes.
Wow.
And so they're clones of each other,
Yeah.
And so that was a real shock to me. And they respond differently to food. So our food responses, our microbiomes are really unique to us.
Okay.
And the role of genes on your microbes is really very small. So most of the studies suggest that we can reduce, as a population, if we all improved our diet to the best diet, we could reduce about 75%, 3/4 of all common diseases.
So why do you think that the government aren't backing this as heavily? I know you're on a mission to kind of re-educate the nation, cut out the ultra processed foods and, get healthy to reduce the risk of all these illnesses, but they're not doing the same thing. Why is that?
Well, I think it's because the food companies are making £30 billion a year profit from us.
Yeah.
They reinvest that in marketing and lobbying, which is a form of corruption.
Yeah.
They give grants to universities to do research. They are lobbying Parliament all the time to make sure that nothing is affecting these industries, because they say, if you do anything about this, you'll lose this biscuit factory, in your constituency. So you've got to fight against this, and let's call it, anyone who does this, just call them, oh, you're just for the nanny state.
Yeah.
People should have the right to eat junk food and be as sick as they like. But it's costing us probably over £90 billion a year in lost economy, and one of the reasons that this country is doing so badly. And they, have had certainly the last government had a really powerful grip, so that, we had the sugar tax, which was quite successful, but it was on a tiny number of items.
Yeah.
And they, for ages, were trying to expand it. The food industry just sent their lobbyists in and squashed it.
Shockingly, I read that ultra-processed foods make up more than 75% of children in the UK's diet, which I just find insane. How and what can we do to change this?
Well, we can change it fairly easily by bringing in government rules that government institutions like schools, hospitals, universities should have a maximum amount of ultra-processed food they can serve at any time. And we know this can work because some schools and hospitals do have good food.
Yeah.
It's not like none of them do. It's just very variable. The other thing is we need to start educating children about food again. Things like home economics classes have been axed.
Yeah.
No one can study nutrition at school anymore. So I think it's one of the vital lessons in life that you need to know about. Everyone needs to know about food because it's something you consume 3 times a day, and
you die without.
And many other countries, force children to leave school. They can cook at least 6 meals.
Yeah.
Which is a life skill that,
100%.
It's crazy they don't. So the other thing is you'd ban advertising for children. You go to the dairy aisle and all you see is these ghastly children's yogurts that are the most unhealthy sugar-filled or chemical-filled products. There should be no health claims allowed on any of that stuff, and it should have a health warning on it.
Yeah.
And say this is not healthy. And if schools started to then have healthy foods, in Japan, each school has a dedicated nutritionist teacher who provides the menus for those schools and gets the kids to try it out and links it with lessons as well. So if they're all learning about yogurt or kefir, they'd learn about it and in science as well.
Yeah.
And so he'd introduce them to this. In this way, you could get across the problem of deprived areas where maybe the parents don't have time to teach the kids, and this is a basic skill they could learn. So I think banning advertising junk foods to kids, taking the health warnings off, taking the health halos off and putting warnings on it is the first step. And if that didn't work, then you start taxing it and making that tax go back to pay for all the healthcare that this
damage is caused.
Just as we did with cigarettes. And no one now looks back and thinks, because I get accused, you're just saying you're the nanny state. Well, no one would think of allowing children to buy vodka in their school playground or, packets of Rothmans. We've moved beyond that. So I see this as it's proven to be unhealthy.
Yeah.
And we just need to separate that out and start categorizing it as we, at the same time, replace it with something, because you can't instantly do this.
No.
Because there wouldn't be enough real food around because in this country. So it needs to be a gradual change, but it needs to start somewhere. And I think schools are the best place.
Definitely. As a nation, if we don't make these changes and start to really take our health seriously, what are the consequences going to be?
Consequences of continuing the way we are, being the most unhealthy eaters in Europe, is dreadful. We're going to see increasing food allergies, autoimmune disease, depression, anxiety, mental health problems in the young.
Gosh.
We're going to see more heart disease, diabetes. Nearly everyone is going to end up on Ozempic-type drugs because they're obese, which will be costing the country a fortune. You're going to get more dementia because dementia is related to poor food and food diets. The next pandemic is going to wipe out many more people in this country because we know that the quality of the diet was related to COVID severity, and our immune system is going to be we're going to age faster than we would do. So it's already happening in this country compared to other countries. People are living less long than their parents. And the country's economy is going to collapse, really, because we won't be able to sustain a population that's largely not working. There's over 3 million people who can't work because of ill health at the moment. That's going to get greater. And there'll be no one, to actually pay the taxes and do things. So it's a real doomsday scenario if we just are complacent and say, oh, well, nothing wrong with the odd bit of snacking, is there? But unfortunately there is, and it's not just health, it's everything about our country that is at stake.
Should we talk about protein? Because that's something that seems to be everywhere of people should be having. The protein bars everywhere. Go to the gym, go home and have a protein heavy meal.
Yeah, gyms are full of protein products. I can't believe when I last went, the range of them, all of them ultra-processed, chemical-based products, nothing natural. And I think there's a huge marketing-led campaign here that's making billions for the industry, selling something that's false, namely that we need more protein.
Yeah.
We think 95% of people in this country are getting adequate protein.
Okay.
There are maybe 5% who aren't. These might be elderly people who are not eating much. They might be vegan weightlifters. Generally people who aren't eating much food at all, because you have to be on a diet at the same time as restricting meat or something in order to have a potential problem. For most of us who eat a normal diet, getting enough general calories, people don't realize there's protein in virtually everything we eat.
Yeah.
So
I made pasta from scratch the other day, and with my friend who's an Italian chef from Rome, and he was like, people don't realize that pasta is protein because it's just a semolina powder and 6 eggs.
8% protein, and then if you add eggs to it, it's even more. So, just by eating grains and whatever, you're getting this. But what I would like people to do is to ignore that advice, stop wasting their money on protein supplements, protein bars, protein snacks. The evidence that it cuts your appetite is quite minimal.
Okay.
It's a little bit, but it's not worth all those extra chemicals. And start thinking about getting plant protein in your diet, which is higher quality.
Okay. And where do we get plant protein from?
From things what we call legumes or pulses, which is a family word for beans, lentils, chickpeas, those kind of foods, which packed with protein. They also have lots of fiber, other nutrients, and they're incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
You can get a can of beans for 40p. And even baked beans are a really good source of protein.
Yeah.
And I'm not against people eating baked beans if they pick the one that doesn't have too much sugar in the sauce.
Okay.
So people can cut back on their meat. If you do that, you're doing your bit for the planet, because especially beef and lamb is about the worst thing you can do. It costs 100 times more in terms of carbon and climate effects to have a gram of beef than it does a gram of, say, lentils or peas. And you're getting the same protein.
Wow.
So I think, I do eat meat once or twice a month, though. And we all eat much too much poor quality meat, where we get better health and save the planet if we just switched. So I think people understanding about protein and make this what we call a protein pivot.
Yeah.
Which is one of the sort of key principles.
I wouldn't even know where to begin. My mum wasn't the most incredible cook. She'd do a roast dinner, a lasagna, all the shepherd's pie, the basics. But with your book, you can learn how to work with all these grains and pulses and make a tasty meal, which I think is really good.
Well, that's what I've loved doing. And this journey for me is, I've been on this journey as well, because I had the same diet.
Yeah.
And once you move away from having the meat as the centerpiece,
Yeah.
and you've only got a little bit of space on the plate to put other stuff, and you move plants to center, and you suddenly realize you can get all this diversity, and you get that same satisfaction from beans and mushrooms. It's something we call one of those extra senses called umami. That sort of rich savoriness.
Yeah.
And with miso sauces and things like this. So many of these dishes, you forget that there isn't meat in there because you're getting that same hit.
Yeah.
And you're getting that same amount of protein, just in a much healthier way that's also helping your gut microbes. So I think, by using examples in this book, people can really change the way they think about what a main dish should be. And there's many of them there. We use lots of frozen peas straight out of the freezer, cans of beans.
Which is
cheap.
which is handy for, if you haven't got lots of money or you're a busy mom, you're also working, knowing that you've always got those frozen peas in the freezer or that tin of beans in the cupboard.
About a third of the recipes here you can just do from the larder.
Yeah.
And so that's really something I've got now. My larder sorted up is absolutely stacked with high protein beans and grains and cans of tomatoes and whatever, so that I can put together a really good tasty meal without having to go shopping if I'm late or whatever. And it's really cheap. So I think people, if you can learn just 4 or 5 of those recipes, then, not only you save time, but also, you and your family can be super healthy at the same time and help the planet.
But when you go to the gym and afterwards the personal trainer or the gym instructor will say, like, go and have a high protein meal because that's going to feed your muscles and make you more muscly. Is that?
There's no hard evidence that's true. As long as you're getting enough protein in every meal,
okay,
you don't have to go and suddenly get a
extra.
super high protein drink. And you don't have to do it immediately. You should have something within about 4 hours.
Okay.
But the idea you've got to instantly do this and you've got this special product that does it, there's no hard evidence to suggest that's true. So I think as long as you think of each meal has some protein in it, you're going to replenish what you've been losing. Unless you're some professional athlete, which you're doing extreme stuff where you might need more. But you've got to realize that it's all one big con, and it's all being driven by a money-making industry, and most of the products have nothing to do with real food, and think dairy products, think beans, think all these other whole grain pasta, all these things are really good and high in protein and things. Doesn't have to be a steak and a special whey protein milkshake.
Okay. Going back to fiber, how important is fiber for us, and where do we get it from? Because, you see all these cereals for kids full of fiber, added vitamins, and then the conflicting theories behind them is the processed foods and they're really bad for you. So, as a mum, you're thinking, oh God, I'm buying this cereal full of vitamins, full of fiber, and when in fact, I'm actually causing more harm than good.
Yeah, again, this is misleading labeling on these packets. And some countries have banned all labeling on cereal packets, many in South America, for example. And they ban cartoon characters because, kids will push their, parents to say, I want that one because I like Tony the Tiger or whatever it is.
Of course.
And they'd say, well, that, you shouldn't, if that was on cigarettes, you wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. So
most of them are super high in sugar, or they now got artificial sweeteners. Both are bad and sensitize kids to sweetness. Generally, the fiber, even if they say high fiber on it, it's not very high fiber.
Okay.
And it's artificial fibers. They've just added in. They add in sort of chemical extract fibers, which will be of some benefit.
Yeah.
But generally, it will be tiny amounts. You've got to remember that we should be aiming for 30 grams of fiber a day. So if you look on the pack and you say each serving you get like 1 or 2 grams of fiber, that ain't worth it for all that sugar and chemicals. And making that kid really super hungry and hyper in 2 or 3 hours' time because of all the sugar and the nothing's really getting to the microbes. So be wary of all this stuff. And I just think one of the worst things are breakfast cereals.
Yeah.
I know they're easy for parents and they last forever and whatever, but there really are no good ones.
So what would you recommend to feed our kids for breakfast? And I know you're not going to say a glass of orange juice because you seem to be against that.
I used to be a big orange juice fan, but no, orange juice is nearly as bad as Coca-Cola in terms of what it does to the body, and sugar.
Freshly squeezed.
Freshly squeezed is better than the stuff you buy in the cartons, which has been stuck in factories for about 2 years.
Great.
Before it gets to you. But they taste great, and I'm not against having them occasionally.
Yeah.
But realize it has the same effect on your sugar as Coca-Cola, and that also freshly squeezed. We weren't designed to eat 8 oranges in 30 seconds.
Okay.
And so you are getting too much sugar and liquid when you have it, even freshly squeezed. So by all means, once a week, have a freshly squeezed orange juice, but if you really like it, but don't have it every day. I think that's my recommendation. And get kids eating more things that like overnight oats, not the ready instant ones, because they are really they're ultra processed, and B, they spike your glucose levels. Overnight oats, the steel cut ones that take a while to cook.
Yeah.
Or what I have now is yogurt, fruit, and nuts.
Yeah.
Or an egg, boiled egg, the leftovers from last night's meal. Nothing wrong with that. You look around the world, everyone has a different breakfast. If you go to India, there's no difference between breakfast, lunch and dinner, right? Yeah. We've all seen this in other countries. So it was the food manufacturers who forced us to start having breakfast.
Yeah.
And not everyone needs breakfast. Even some kids are not hungry at breakfast, right? And you're forcing them to eat. There's no evidence that you should feel guilty if they go out without having eaten, as long as they're not going to just binge on snacks or crap food afterwards.
That was me this morning, forcing my daughter to eat a porridge. Like, you're not going to school unless you eat this breakfast.
But it depends what they're going to have for lunch. If you knew they were going to have a fantastic lunch, had all balanced protein, and they were going to get lots of diversity and fermented foods, things, fine. You're not hungry, that's fine, as long as you eat a good lunch.
Being tired, like if they're not having a good breakfast.
But they've done lots of studies now, and many athletes perform better running on an empty stomach than they do eating. So it used to be the idea you used to have to eat first. Yeah. But now only really if you're doing more than 3 hours exercise. So I discovered this, I used to eat before sports, and now it's the worst thing for me. Mm-hmm. I feel much more energized if I haven't eaten.
How do you feel about fasting? That's another buzzword that's going around now, intermittent fasting, resting your gut.
I'm a big fan of what I call time-restricted eating,
which
isn't quite the same as fasting. It's because you're not trying to limit the total amount you eat. You're just trying to stop us eating for most of the day continuously, which is what, again, the food manufacturers want us to do, is to have, mid-morning snack, 11s, and then tea, and then, something before your dinner, and then, a few sandwiches while you're watching telly afterwards, or a bit of cake, and then you go to bed. Yeah. That's a disaster for our gut microbes. Okay. They get no chance to rest. They can't repair themselves overnight. You get leaky gut, you get inflammation, all kinds of problems. So this is only about the last 5 years this concept has come out of trying to leave a 14-hour time window overnight so that you finish eating at, say, 9 and you don't eat until 11 o'clock the next day. Or if you, like you're desperate for breakfast, you have your breakfast at 8 o'clock and then you finish eating at 6 p.m.
Yeah. Which I think is doable.
it's doable for some people.
Yeah.
And we did
Eat early.
we did a huge community study of over 100,000 people. We found that a third of people did this quite easily.
Yeah.
A third did it, but found it a bit tricky. And a third couldn't cope.
Couldn't do it.
Even start, they looked at it, so, oh no, I can't do that. So, but people who do it and did manage it feel more energy, they feel less hunger, they lose a little bit of weight, and generally they're helping their gut microbes. So I would tell everyone out there to give it a go.
Yeah.
But don't sacrifice your mental health, your social life.
Yeah.
It's something you shouldn't be obsessional about.
Yeah.
And my rule is, if you can do it 80% of the time, that's fine. If weekends are off limits, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's to get a habit that you could continue for decades, rather than trying
because you're not going to see a difference after a week, are you?
Well,
really?
You might. It might just tell you this works for me, but I found it hard to continue because I couldn't do it every day. Don't worry about that. Say, well, okay, do it for a couple of weeks. This is what these people did. They did it for 3 weeks. See how you feel. Is it for you? Is it not? Is it hard? Is it difficult? Does it mess up your social life? All these things. And then plan what you're going to do. But I think even if you do it a couple of days a week, it reminds you about snacking. Yeah. And people who did it, they lost weight. And studies have shown that it's not so much that they're thinking about food more. So they're not just grabbing something mindlessly before they go to bed, or just a bit of chocky or a bit of this or a biscuit. You're thinking, no, I'll give my gut a rest. Yeah. Probably as evolution had intended us to do. And that's very true. And talking of evolution, when I was 10 years ago, I was living with an African tribe who are hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. Wow. And they don't have a word for breakfast. And nobody there ate before about 10 or 11 o'clock. And they finished about,
What time are they getting up?
Oh,
like 6, 7?
About 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
They weren't hungry. You'll be the exception in that tribe, you see. But you can.
But I also like a piece. I also need a cup of tea and a bicky before bed. That's so bad. I eat early. We have our dinner at like 5 p.m. And then around 9, I'm like, Pete, my husband, can you go down and get me a cup of tea and a biscuit? And my brother, who's like a health fanatic, he's like, that's so bad. It's the worst thing you could do. You're spiking your sugar before bed.
Or just have a bit more at your dinner.
Yeah.
And have the tea and bicky as your dessert, or more. Have something more filling or more fruit or cheese or something else.
I'm not hungry. I'm just being I think it's a habit.
Well, it's definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I used to have a northern girlfriend, and definitely
yeah, it is a northern thing
from Newcastle, and definitely, the cake came out at sort of 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I like to dip my
biscuits in and get into bed.
But it's not a good habit.
No.
And so, by all means, have those treats, but have them attached to your meal times so that you've got real time for your gut to recover, and you'll notice the difference.
So there's a lot of conversation now around sugar and how bad it is for us, and it's a contributing factor to all of these diseases, all these inflammatory diseases such as, diabetes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancers. How bad is sugar for us?
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And we have too much of it in its refined form. It's being added to foods. In its natural form, it was harder to get out of the plant or the fruit. It took a while. So it'd be slowly extracted from your body, and absorbed. We weren't supposed to be having these huge amounts of it. And what studies have shown that when you're having a sugary food like a muffin or a biscuit, you'll get a sugar spike.
Yeah.
And we found in our Zoe studies there's a 10-fold difference between people eating the same cookies in how they responded. And it wasn't whether you were male, female, young or old, just this rather unpredictable difference. So some people had huge spikes. And that was associated with poorer metabolism, gain in weight long term, gain in diabetes. So gradually it's stressing your system, it's stressing your immune system. And the other thing we found is about a third of women and a quarter of men had a sugar dip afterwards. So I don't know whether you're one of those people that if you had a big carby breakfast or croissants and muffins and things, at about 10:30, you get a bit of a slump.
Yeah.
And you say, oh gosh, I really need a pick-me-up. I need a coffee and a biscuit or something to get me up again. So we were doing these monitoring and people didn't know what their levels were. And they were reporting this tiredness and they also felt hungry. And those people had these dips where it ended up eating 20, 30% more than people who didn't have the dips.
Yeah.
So sugar is generally bad, but some people it affects much more than others.
Okay.
And that's really what we're teasing apart with Zoe, because we tell people you've got a real problem with this sugar.
Yeah.
But in general, we're all having too much sugar, and you end up in a bit of a vicious circle, because if you start off with sugar in the morning rather than a high fiber meal or a high fat meal, you're going to get this sort of recurring problem. But if you do have that 10:30, 11 o'clock slump, then it's probably because you're having not only the peak, but also this dip afterwards.
Yeah. You talk a lot in your book about fermented foods and adding these into our diets. Why is that?
Fermented foods are live, it's like probiotics in food.
Okay.
That are natural, and you're generally getting between 3 and 30 different species of bug in there, including fungi and yeasts. And studies show that people who have at least 3 portions a day of these can within 2 weeks dramatically improve their immune systems.
Wow.
So again, we've done a community study of this, and it's really easy to incorporate them, and people feel better very quickly.
Okay.
And we think that these bugs they're going into our small intestine and tickling up the immune system to give them extra chemicals and signals to say things are healthy, it's good. So these are perfect things to have if you're having antibiotics or you're trying to counteract some bad foods or illness or anything else like this. So there's increasing scientific evidence that they are really healthy, and we should, all of us, be having several portions a day to complement the microbes that are in us, because historically, before fridges, that's what we used.
Yeah.
Everything was fermented because it keeps it safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yogurt doesn't go off because the microbes are producing acid to keep away nasty microbes. But we need to eat it in its healthy original form. It mustn't be low fat. It mustn't have all kinds of fake fruit stuck in it.
Yeah.
You don't want additives. You don't want sweeteners.
What do you think about supplement probiotics?
I think some of them can be helpful. But in general, I would rather we took our probiotics in the food.
Okay.
Because generally you get, not only are these proven to work, but you're getting a richer variety of the microbes on a regular basis. So if you have something like a kimchi or a kefir or kombucha, which is fermented tea, you can get up to 30 different strains.
Okay.
Which is a lot. But there is a place for some probiotics, and they've been shown, for example, to work to counteract depression in some people. But at the moment, it's very hard to give specific advice.
Yeah.
Because all the trials use slightly different combinations of them. So in general, they work. I'm not against them, but I'd rather people got into fermented foods instead.
Yeah. Do we need any supplements?
Do you take any?
I've got every single supplement you can possibly think. The main thing I'm focusing on at the moment is my hair. Like, it's just been falling out. So it's like tricollagen, I'm taking Viviscal, iron.
So there are hundreds of supplements. It's $1 billion industry. I think 50% of the UK population are taking some regular supplement.
Yeah.
And the evidence from the research and the clinical studies are that 99% are completely useless.
Great.
So there are
expensive whey.
It's very expensive whey, and sometimes dangerous. So some of them have been shown to actually cause harm. So there's increasing evidence that taking calcium supplements increases your risk of heart disease.
Yeah.
There's evidence if you take too much vitamin D, you get falls and fractures. There are some cancers caused by some other vitamin supplements where you can't pee it out. It actually increases in the system. So to think of them as harmless is wrong. There are a few that are effective. B12 is a good one because if you're vegan and you're not eating a lot of meat, they can be really, really helpful. Iron, if you're female and you're having problems with your periods, for example, that's a very useful one. Folic acid, when you're pregnant, is proven to reduce problems. I think all the others have virtually no benefit, including vitamin D, the UK's favourite vitamin, which isn't a vitamin, is actually a pro-hormone. It's like a steroid. And the huge studies have now shown that it has no benefit on normal people preventing fractures or bone health. And again, if you take too much of it, it's bad for you. So we're changing our views on vitamins big time. And I wish people would throw away all these supplements and say, now I can afford to buy better food.
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah, because they're not cheap.
They're not cheap, no. And, they're all made in ultra-processed factories in China and shipped over here. And, you just think of the waste of plastic and what people could be doing with their money to do something proper with their health, buying a new mattress to sleep better, exercising more or buying real food. I just think it's wrong that we keep doing this. And I know some people feel that there's a placebo effect. They feel a sort of warm glow from taking something. But I think, we need to move away from that and say, okay, well, take a fermented food instead. Have a kefir drink or a kombucha, something that's actually got some real ingredients that have been shown to work.
I think the thought process behind it is like we're lacking in vitamin D in this country, so we need to take vitamin D. And, calcium gives strong bones, so we'll take calcium. I don't think they look at a vitamin and go, that hasn't been tried and tested, so it doesn't work. They just see what the body needs.
Yeah, but it's a fallacy. I mean, the definition of a vitamin is you need minute amounts in order to sustain your body's chemical reactions.
Okay.
And there are only a few of them that we can't produce ourselves. So that's immediately vitamin D is not one like that, because when you go in the sun, you produce your own vitamin D. Mm-hmm. So 2/3 of your vitamin D comes from sunshine, 1/3 comes from the diet. So we evolved to have, in Europe, to have fair skin so that we would produce plenty of vitamin D in the limited sunshine we had.
Yeah.
So in summer, we gain lots of vitamin D, and that generally lasts us over winter until spring.
Yeah.
So most of us are fine. We've got big reserves, and we top it up by eating mushrooms, which have vitamin D, by eating oily fish, and a few other nuts and seeds and things. But, we don't need supplements. And the studies show that when you add supplements to it, you don't get any benefit.
Okay.
And the reason is this fallacy that having super amounts of a vitamin does you good, whereas actually all you need is this minimum amount and the body does the rest, because that's what we've evolved for. It's like super amounts of vitamin C do not help.
Yeah.
We just need tiny amounts to stop us getting ill. And this is this general fallacy that the whole industry has built off, that more is better. Mm-hmm. But now we're finding that more actually can cause problems harm. Or, give you, like in vitamin D, give you actual more fractures. Yes, I know it sounds complicated, but I think if people stick to these 6 basic principles, they can't go far wrong. So 30 plants a week, which gives you the diversity and all the fiber you need.
Yeah.
And that includes nuts, seeds, herbs and spices. Eating the rainbow, which gives you these defense chemicals, these polyphenols, which means you can have all these bitter and brightly colored things on your plate. Regular fermented foods,
Yeah.
which gives a real boost to your gut microbes. Pivoting your protein away from meats, particularly processed meats, which are really harmful for you, towards having more protein from plants, particularly good things like beans and legumes and chickpeas, lentils, etc. And realizing that, you know, most grains and things like pasta have plenty of protein, and most people are not protein deficient in this country. And then giving your gut a rest.
Yeah.
So cutting out those late night snacks and aiming for at least 12 hours overnight where you're not eating, so really rest your gut microbes.
Yeah.
Give it a try anyway. Most people find it easy. Don't beat yourself up if you can't. And really importantly, reducing the ridiculously high levels of ultra-processed food we're eating in this country, down to levels of our Mediterranean neighbors, you know, which means reducing it by 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
So have it as an occasional treat. Don't have it regularly, and start to learn how to spot, you know, what these fake foods are and go back to real foods.
Yeah. Keeping everything natural.
Yeah, and exactly. And just think about your food in a different way. And I think, you know, the other thing we haven't really discussed is how we should be, I think, completely ignoring calories.
Yeah.
Because they're misleading. Because if your calories are made up of ultra-processed food or real food, your body will deal with it completely
Different way.
And it's the wrong way to look at food. It's such a crude indicator. You know, and the Zoe program ignores calories completely, and that's quite liberating for many people. And you should actually avoid anything that says low calorie on the packet.
Okay.
Because that means it's fake.
And sugar-free?
Avoid that as well. Avoid low fat.
Yeah.
All these things are signs to completely avoid it.
Okay.
And fat is not an enemy. It's absolutely fine. And there's many healthy, beneficial fats. So I think that's the other thing, is that we just need to reset our idea and think about food in a different way. You know, food is nutrition not only for us, but also for our gut microbes. And each time you put something in your mouth, you're thinking, it's not just me eating this. You know, I've got my little garden in there that I'm trying to nourish.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that attitude, then it really changes the way you think about food forever.
I think the time I was most proactive doing that was when I was pregnant. Instead of thinking of, like, you know, the microbiomes that you've got, it was like my baby. So I was so conscious of everything I put in my body was good. And then the baby comes out, and then you're like back to, you know.
Yeah, we have these babies, but we have them for, 80 years.
I know.
And it's whether we think of them as our garden or our little goldfish in there, or however you like to imagine it.
Yeah.
If you can do that, then, you'll be making the better decisions for your diet. And you realize that, with 100 trillion of these guys in there, you're never going to be eating alone again.
No, I think it's definitely, I think the younger generation are definitely more health conscious and more into saving the planet. And it's something that my kids are,
Well, your food choices are the single most important thing you can do for your health and the planet.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important message.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Tim. I am totally inspired. I'm going to show you a picture of my empty cupboards later on with no sugar, no crap in there. And yeah, I love your cookbook. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.